This is a story beginning in the late 1800s that spans across 4 generations of women, starting with Akoko. Akoko, the firstborn daughter of the great chief Odero Gogni of Yimbo. Akoko learned survival at a young age as she already had 9 brothers when she was born. It was said that at 10 months, Akoko uttered her first words, and not mama or baba as you would expect, but Dwarumara, which she screamed at her older brother Olo, meaning want mine. Many seasons passed, and in her 17th season, the chief felt that he was ready to start receiving proposals for her. Many sent spies to check her out, and word of her beauty spread throughout the land. Because of this, suitors all from well-to-do families came in droves, but none were good enough for the firstborn daughter of the great chief Odero. At 19 seasons, Akoko was convinced that Were had forgotten to create a man good enough for her. That is, until Owuor came into the picture. Owuor was now a chief at the young age of 20 seasons after the death of his father, Chief Kembo Kagina, and it was unthinkable for a chief not to have a wife. If their proposal was accepted, Akoko would hold the envious position of Mikai, the first wife, and not just of any man, but that of a chief. But the great chief Odero was not going to make it easy on them. Wanting to knock them down a notch, he asked for 30 heads of cattle, which was 2.5 times the usual bride price. Now, much to everyone's surprise and disapproval, especially Otieno, Owuor's younger brother, who was of the view that all women were the same, Owuor agreed to the bride price without putting up a fight. So time came and Akoko was brought in so that they could see what they were getting. Now, typically, girls at this point would come in with their heads held down, looking all meek, but not Akoko. She came in with her head held high, looking straight into Owuor's eyes. And let me tell you, the boy was stricken. It was love at first sight, which was something that he didn't understand because back then, love was not a factor in getting married. Akoko was taken to her new home in Sakwa, and 10 months later, she gave birth to a son, Obura. It wasn't until 3.5 seasons later that she got pregnant and gave birth to Nyabera. At this point, Owuor's mother was pressuring him to marry another wife because they'd seen Akoko wasn't giving birth very often, because back then, 3 years was a long break between kids. She even got the Jodongo involved, that's the Council of Elders, but Owuor did not want any other woman except for Akoko. This was crazy at the time because monogamy was unheard of. When Nyabera was around 4, the chief's mother, in her complaining, said that Akoko must have bewitched his son, and that's why he wasn't marrying another woman. This did not sit well with Akoko. To accuse someone of witchcraft was a serious crime. The next day, while the chief was away, Akoko made a huge scene at what was said about her, packed her bags, left her kids, and went back home. Later on, when the chief came and heard all that transpired, he beat his brother half to death and gave his mother some very harsh words, almost lifting up his hand to beat her as well, which would have been a great taboo, and still is, and should be. After a few days, they went to negotiate the return of Akoko, and after reassuring her family that the matter had been taken care of, they agreed and Akoko went back to Sakwa. Soon after, she conceived and bore a son whom they called Owangsino. Many seasons passed, and soon rumors and stories of the white man started to come. Obura, their firstborn, became fascinated and wanted to go see the world, but his parents refused. After all, he was supposed to be the next chief. So he did what any teenager would do in this situation, and he ran away. About 2 seasons later, in 1918, a strange man came and brought the news of Obura's passing. He died fighting in the war, World War I, a war that had nothing to do with him. 4 seasons later, when Nyabera was 18, she got married to an average Joe in the next village since her parents didn't want her to go too far. They got children quickly, 3 of them, but sadly, each of them died. Owangsino, the chief's lastborn, was very eager to get married to make up for Obura. So at 19 seasons, he found a suitable girl, but just before they finished negotiations, his dad, Chief Owuor Kembo, died. After the mourning period was over, the bride price was paid, and Alando was brought home to her husband. Soon, she got pregnant and gave birth to a boy who they named Owuor. Not too long after, the new young chief passed away. He choked on a fishbone and died right in front of his wife and mother. So now Otieno was chief, and Otieno took all that his brother had and even tried to steal Akoko's wealth. But Akoko would not take this lying down. She decided to reach out to the Serekal that she had heard about in Kisumu. Olo sent his 2 twin sons Opio and Odongo to accompany her to the great bartering market of Kisumu, a journey that took 6 days. The Dio heard what Akoko had to say and decided that he would dispatch a team to the village to investigate, and in 3 months she would come back and appeal to the DC, another chief white man. Within 12 days, the Dio sent messengers to investigate, and in less than a month, the messenger was sent and 2 askaris to escort Akoko back to make her appeal to the DC. So Akoko repeated her complaint to the DC, and then the messenger gave his findings which supported what Akoko had said. The DC decided that the askaris would go to Sakwa and forcibly remove Otieno as chief, and he should return all that he had stolen from Akoko. The Jodongo, which Otieno had done away with, would rule the village until Owuor came of age. So Akoko went back to her village, triumphant. Shortly after, Akoko took all that she had and went to Yimbo to live with her brother Olo because there was nothing left for her at Sakwa, since she had already taken Owuor to Yimbo. At the time when Akoko went to the DC, Nyabera had given birth to a daughter, Awiti, and having lost 3 children, she performed a ritual to confuse the evil spirits. When the child was 3, Nyabera's husband died. As was custom, a husband was found among her dead husband's relatives, but he bore very little obligation to her as he had his own wife and family. However, this man started spending more time with Nyabera than his own wife, shamefully neglecting his wife, who reported the matter to the Jodongo, and he was reprimanded. After this, Nyabera decided she had had enough and that change was necessary. She decided to seek out this new religion that she had heard about. She took her daughter Awiti to Yimbo with her mother and made her way to Gem, where the mission was. She arrived and started catechism classes to learn about this new God, Yesu Cristo. She was a fast learner and took well to the new faith. She eventually got baptized and was now known as Maria. After this, she went to Yimbo to visit her mother and daughter, and they all came back to the mission together with Owuor, her nephew. The children were enrolled in both catechism and reading classes. After some time, Owuor, the one who was supposed to become chief, felt a calling into priesthood. And to his surprise, Akoko did not oppose. She only asked one thing, for him to take his grandfather's name. And with that, Petro Owuor Sino, now Peter Owuor Kembo, joined the seminary. Soon after he left for the seminary, Awiti was enrolled to the newly founded primary school as one of the only 2 girls, and years later when she sat for the exams, she was the best of them all. With this, she got an invitation to study at the newly opened teacher training college. While there, many men tried to woo Awiti, who now went by Elizabeth, her Christian name. But she just wasn't interested. That is until enter Mark Anthony Sigu. Mark was a military man who had fought in the now-ended World War II, about to report to a civilian job. They exchanged letters for about 6 months, and she got her teacher certificate during this time and was posted back to her old school in Alur, which she was very grateful for, since she could be near her mother and her grandmother, who was now 80 and was not doing well. Soon after, Mark's family went for negotiations and everything went smoothly. Akoko, Elizabeth's grandmother, and Mark got along very well. That night, Akoko passed away quietly in her sleep and was buried in the hallowed burial ground of the church. After the mourning period was over, the wedding was postponed so that Peter, who was now in Rome, could get ordained and marry them. After the wedding, they moved to Nakuru, where Mark worked for a farmers' association and Elizabeth at a nearby primary school. After 3 years of marriage, Elizabeth conceived and gave birth to twins. Becky and Vera were as different as East is from the West, but Vera had immense love for her sister. When they were 2, Elizabeth gave birth to Owuor, and 2 weeks after his birth, Elizabeth and the children moved to Alur, where they were safe away from all the freedom fighting that was going on between the Mau Mau and the colonialists. After gaining uhuru, many white men left in droves, leaving many promotions up for grabs. Mark got promoted to manager and they moved to a larger house. By now, they had 7 children. Becky and Vera were 12, Owuor was 10, Tony 8, Opio and Odongo identical twins were 5, and Mary was barely a year old. Soon after, Vera and Becky sat for their final primary school examination, and as expected, Vera had a nearly perfect score and was called to a top national school for girls. This was great news, except Vera refused to go. She wanted to stay with Becky, so they both went to the school that Becky was called to. The twins were sent to a role to keep their grandmother, Maria, company. In 1972, the house had 3 candidates: Tony, who was determined to go to the same school as Owuor, and Becky and Vera, who were now always at each other's throat. Vera, who had once given up a golden opportunity to be with Becky, could not wait to get as far away from her as possible. She was determined to do her A-levels at the school she had refused to go to before. Vera and Tony passed and went to the schools they wanted, while Becky wanted to look for work to be an air hostess, but Mark would not have it. She went back to school for her A-levels at her old school. It was during this time that Elizabeth got news of her mother, Maria, being sick. They immediately packed to go see her, and by the time they arrived at Owuor, she had been taken to Maseno Hospital and was in a coma. Elizabeth sat by her mother all night long, and at 7 a.m., Maria breathed her last. After the funeral, the children went back to their respective schools. Eventually, they sat for their exams. Owuor and Vera passed as expected, while Becky failed, but she didn't seem too concerned. One morning, Vera woke up to find a note from Becky telling her she had gone to Nairobi to stay with friends who would help her become an air hostess. After some time, Vera was also off to campus life at the University of Nairobi. Vera had tried looking for Becky during this time, but to no avail. She decided to try again. She hopped on a bus to JKIA, and as she was walking toward the Kenya Airways booth, she actually ran into her sister, who looked breathtaking in her uniform. They went back to Becky's place, and you could tell she was living well. Becky was living with her boyfriend, a Canadian pilot, and they intended to get married. Eventually, they did, after visiting her parents 3 years after she had ran away. Owuor joined the University of Nairobi to study medicine, and here is where he met Wandia Mugo from Murang'a, who was also in his class. They became academic rivals, friends, and eventually they fell in love. Soon after they finished school, they got married. Vera was now an electronics expert and a non-marrying member of Opus Dei, an institution of the Catholic Church. Her and Wandia became fast friends. By now, Becky had 2 children, and her husband had filed for divorce due to Becky's infidelity and had gone back to Canada. Wandia became pregnant with twins and gave birth to Daniel, who had Down syndrome, and Lisa. They also adopted Alicia and Johnny. These are Becky's children who were left under the guardianship of Vera after Becky succumbed to AIDS. Becky had, however, left them quite the fortune. Wandia joined the university as a lecturer, and then she got a scholarship to study at Johns Hopkins University. Wandia went and came back and eventually became the chairperson of the Department of Pathology in the University of Nairobi School of Medicine. She was now Professor Wandia Sigu with a doctorate in medicine. She was the first Kenyan woman to achieve such a feat in medicine. That day, everyone was there to celebrate with Wandia, including Elizabeth, who was now 70. The next day after the celebrations, Elizabeth passed away on their way home to Nakuru. The funeral mass was conducted by His Lordship Peter Owuor Kembo, Bishop of the Diocese of Kisumu, and was assisted by Father Tony Sigu. Mark followed his wife within a year. As they were burying Elizabeth, nearby was Becky's grave covered with flowers, as beautiful as she had been in this life. And that is the river and the source.